shells fell near us.
They left behind spent mortar, shell and machine gun casings and 10 dead civilians. 21 people were wounded, including a 7-year-old boy who survived a bullet lodged in his nose. These people who were killed, were they fighters or were they ordinary people?
Ordinary people. Ordinary people. He is going when Gaddafi's people. He is coming to university.
2 of the bodies were said to be of Gaddafi fighters. It was claimed one carried ID showing he was from Niger in Africa, but it's hard to verify. Despite the howls of bravado, this brazen attack has provoked both fear and anger and reminds everyone of the violent threats of Gaddafi. On Wednesday, we witnessed why the opposition is desperate for a no-fly zone and why it may not have the military capability to liberate all of Libya by force just yet. But this conflict seems far from over, and the question is how many more Libyans are going to die before it is. Tony Bertley, AlJazeera, Brega, Eastern Libya.
Well, let's get an update now from inside Libya. Our correspondent Hoda Abdelhamid joins us now live from Brega. Hoda, tell us first what you know about the situation in Brega as we speak right now. Have the anti-government forces won the battle for Brega definitely?
Well, no. I am in Benghazi, but we just talked to a source in Brega. Now, what he describes is clashes between government forces and anti-government forces on the outskirts of that town. So I think what's really going on for the past 48 hours is just a very fluid situation whereby Brega gets liberated by the protesters and then it gets retaken by the government forces. And we have seen that pattern over and over again. Government forces obviously having also air support and having carried out several airstrikes over the past few hours.
We are hearing, in fact, of another airstrike on Brega right now. According to Reuters news agency, an airstrike has hit Brega airport. How well organized and how well armed, Hoda, are the anti-government forces? Do they have the capability to defend the territory that they have acquired so far?
Well, I think as the National Council put it yesterday, all they have at the moment is defensive forces. Certainly they did overrun all the weapon caches that were left by the army. They are mobilizing, they are training, they have the will, but certainly they are not as a formidable force as the, let's say, the special forces, the elite forces, the Revolutionary Guards that are still very loyal to the government are. So it's certainly that's probably why they're calling on the international community to impose a no-fly zone and to carry out pinpointed strikes, because there is a realization on the ground that no matter how much will you have, they don't have all the means really to crush the government forces.
Again, we are hearing of airstrikes targeting the airport in Brega in eastern Libya, as well as in the nearby town of AlJazeera. If you're just joining us on Al Jazeera, we're speaking to Hoda Abdelhamid, who is in Benghazi, of course. Hoda, of course, in the last few hours, there's been talk about mediation possibly from Venezuela and so on. But are we at that stage right now, at the stage of mediation, of talks, or would the opposition be receptive to that, you think?
I don't think the opposition would be receptive to any kind of mediation, if not one about an exit strategy for Muammar Gaddafi, his family, and maybe some of his close aides around him. From what I understand, the feeling here is that what happened over the past few weeks is actually an unexpected gain that nobody wants to lose, and that they also say that it's too late now to come back. There's too much uncertainty to try to reverse the clock at this stage, and people here do say, well, we have to continue the fight because at this stage we have no choice. If we don't continue the fight, well, then the government will come back, the government forces will come back, and they'll kill us. So I think at this stage, really, from what I understand, the National Council has been formed. It wants to be a contact point for the international community, and it's very much counting on the international community to actually finish the task.
So the two sides then appear entrenched. Which do you think can hold out the longest, and what direction do you see this taking?
Well, I think this is a question nobody really can answer. When you speak to people, they're very enthusiastic about all what's been achieved so far. But I have to tell you that since yesterday, and basically since the news came that the government forces were in Brega, which is just 200 kilometers away from Benghazi, the tensions have risen considerably. People are extremely worried. People do say that Gaddafi would not go without putting up a very big fight, and they do realize that the situation is very different, for example, from what happened in Egypt. Here we're in a country where there is an armed conflict at the moment. That armed conflict is not controlled by anyone. It's really quite chaotic, especially on the opposition side, because it's really based on volunteers who are just going there and taking risks, and whatever happens, happens. And they are incurring a lot of casualties. I was told by one of the members of the National Council that a group of 480 tried to make their way to Tripoli. Only 80 of them came back, the rest were killed.
Indeed, there have been conflicting reports on the number of casualties. Thank you very much, Hada Abdelhamid, reporting there live from eastern Libya in Benghazi. Now, as you just heard, Al Jazeera has learned that Muammar Gaddafi has indeed accepted an offer by the Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez to try and mediate an end to this crisis. Our correspondent Dima Hatib has the details from the Venezuelan capital, Caracas.
Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez spoke on the phone to Muammar Gaddafi and proposed to him the idea of forming a commission for peace in Libya, and Muammar Gaddafi is said to have approved that idea. From then on, the Venezuelan foreign minister contacted Amr Moussa, the Secretary General of the Arab League, and I am told by a government source in Venezuela that Amr Moussa also approved the mediation idea. So Venezuela is trying to basically form this commission. It's in touch with several Arab countries and Latin American countries, as well as countries in other places as well, and organizations such as UNASUR, which is the Union of South American Nations, and ALBA. And we hope in the next few days to find out exactly what the efforts will be about and what they hope to reach in mediating between the government in Libya and the representatives of the rebels.
Well, the Arab League says it could impose a no-fly zone over Libya if the fighting continues. The group Secretary General says this action could be taken in coordination with the African Union.
We'll continue consultations on the best way to protect and guarantee the safety and security of the Libyan people and that of the Arab nations. We will not remain idle in light of the bloodshed that the Libyan people are facing, and therefore we may resort to a no-fly zone, and the Arab League and African Union are cooperating in this regard.
Now, while the U.S. says all options are on the table, top officials have expressed caution over imposing a no-fly zone.
There's a lot of, frankly, loose talk about some of these military options, and let's just call a spade a spade. A no-fly zone begins with an attack on Libya to destroy the air defenses. That's the way you do a no-fly zone. And then you can fly planes around the country and not worry about our guys being shot down. But that's the way it starts.
I'm not endorsing it.
And
I'm
it
just
requires,
wondering.
no, I understand, but it also requires more air